Most people are drafting the tight end position completely wrong this year in fantasy. Simply put, they're chasing names that used to be good. Don't make that same mistake. Instead, you want to be drafting the 5 tight ends that we're going to discuss in this video. And if you're not familiar, I'm Sal Vetri. I've been helping people win their fantasy leagues for nearly 8 years, and we plan to do the same for you in this video. And let's start by discussing the Cleveland Browns tight end David Njoku, who currently, if we look at the ADP, his average draft position, he currently goes as the 88th overall player, the tight end 9 off the board, which is pretty crazy. I mean, you can get him in round 8 of fantasy drafts. Sometimes he falls into round 9 of fantasy drafts, even though he has top 3 tight end upside. I mean, we literally just saw it last year. Because last season, Njoku was the tight end 4 in fantasy. He's actually gotten better every single year of his career in terms of points per game. And when you specifically look at when he got healthy and you look from week 6 to week 14, there was also the Jameis Winston resurgence here. In those 8 games, David Njoku's averaging over 15 fantasy points per game compared to his first 3 with just 8. He has nearly 10 targets per game, which led all tight ends during this stretch compared to just 6 before that. So he became a much better option. He was actually a top 5 tight end, averaging over 15 points per game during that span. And when you zoom out to the full season, despite playing in a terrible offense, the quarterback situation outside of when Jameis took over for like a month and was like one of the most fun things on the year for any team, outside of that, it was a bad situation. Despite all of that, he still finished, like we said, as a top 5 tight end, number 4 overall, and his expected fantasy points based on what he was expected to see, 17.8 points per game, number 2, so he should have been even better last year. This is how good David Njoku was. He's a size speed freak. Overall last year, he only played in 9 games, of which he left some of those early. Despite leaving those games early, he still averaged 8.8 targets per game, which was actually more than guys like, oh, I don't know, George Kittle last year, who goes as a 4th round pick, and we like Kittle in the 4th round, but that's just to show you you're getting really good value right now on Njoku, especially when you compare him to a certain veteran tight end who goes before him. We'll talk about that guy in a second. Because for right now, I just want to focus on the last time we saw Njoku healthy for a full season, which was just the year before that. This guy's a gym rat. He takes care of his body. I mean, if we're talking about like all body teams in the NFL, pause, he's probably on it. 81 catches, 123 targets back in 2023. Oh yeah, and during that season, he actually played with Joe Flacco, which is important because Joe Flacco likely going to be the starter this year. In 5 games with Joe Flacco, you can see right here, 18.6 fantasy points per game, 9 targets per game, and 78 yards per game. These are insane numbers for a tight end. That 18.6 fantasy points per game with Flacco was number 2. It would have ranked number 2 in 2023. And I said that's important because Joe Flacco is once again on this team, and he's on a team right now that if we look at the early reports, he's currently the favorite. You can see this tweet by Adam Levitan. Be sure to follow him. He says right here, he points out an Athletic tweet that says, Joe Flacco, 2 best throwing days so far. Over the last week, Flacco has gone from presumed favorite to strong favorite right now, which is important for everybody in this offense. If you're spending a middle round pick on David Njoku, on Jerry Jeudy, a late round pick on Cedric Tillman, they all look much better right now with Joe Flacco than any of these rookies or even a Kenny Pickett. In terms of the team changes this offseason, this is the team changes tracker in my fantasy blueprint. You can check it out at jointheblueprint.com. Limited spots remaining. Elijah Moore is gone, who was a middle of the field short area target last year, who could have taken targets away from one David Njoku, and they really didn't replace him with much. Deontay Johnson was the biggest addition, as you can see right here, in terms of potential for this team at the wide receiver, even tight end position. I'm not too concerned with that. Now, Deontay Johnson, if he can get his head on straight, he is an older receiver, but maybe he has some juice and can threaten Jerry Jeudy's target share. But David Njoku wins in a very specific way. In the slot, on the line, middle of the field, short areas, that's where he can dominate. And he has the size and athletic ability to actually produce after the catch, which is normally where we see his explosive gains. So yes, when you look at his competition this year, I actually think the Browns have an interesting wide receiver room. We saw Jerry Jeudy flash last year. Same thing for Cedric Tillman and outside X. We'll see what they get out of Deontay Johnson. But in terms of this competition, I mean, yes, Deontay is new there, but even battling Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman last year during that stretch of 8 games when David Njoku was healthy, Njoku actually led the team ahead of Jeudy in target share. It was marginal, but he was the number 1 option on this team. Now, I said I want to compare where he's going this year, David Njoku, in drafts to a certain veteran. And that veteran's name, you know the guy, Travis Kelce. And look, we love the guy. He's about to turn 36 years old right now. I get it. He's been a dominant force, former first-round pick at times in fantasy drafts. Kelce is currently going as the 66th overall player, the tight end 6 in fantasy. He goes 22 picks before, so 2 to 3 rounds before David Njoku, despite Njoku trending up every year, still being someone in the prime of his career, and Travis Kelce, we just saw last year, trending down and not in the prime of his career, and that's pretty clear when you see his yards per route run. Travis Kelce ranked outside the top 20 tight ends in efficiency last year. He only had 3 touchdowns, his lowest ever. He had career lows, not only in yards per route run, but he also had career lows if you look at his yards after the catch, just 2.6 yards after the catch per target. His yards per reception, he was not getting downfield, not breaking off explosive plays. It makes sense. He's nearly 36 years old. This is when tight ends usually retire. Heck, they're usually retired 3 to 4 years before this. So obviously Kelsey's had a great career, but yes, he has the strong name. We know how good he's been. It's not the same situation though. Outside of the age and efficiency drops, you're getting guys like Xavier Worthy entering year 2 who looked great last year. Rashee Rice, whenever he gets back from his presumed suspension, this is another guy who has looked great when he's on the field. Marquise Brown in camp has been dealing with this ankle injury, but when he gets on the field is a guy who can stretch the field, something Travis Kelce has not been showing that he can do lately. So like, yes, Kelce, we hope that he'll be more involved in the red zone this year, but in terms of having like those 10 to 12 target games where he's actually picking up 8, 10, 11 yards per reception, I just don't see it consistently happening to spend a 6th or a 7th round pick on it. Which is why right now people are making the mistake of seeing the name Travis Kelce that they recognize and like, oh, I had to spend a 1st or 2nd round pick on him 2 or 3 years ago. That's a great value. Wrong. The great value, the better value at least I should say, is David Njoku goes 2 to 3 rounds later. You want to be taking David Njoku and this next tight end. And that man's name is Jake Ferguson, which you can see his player profile headshot here is pretty crazy right now. The former 4th round pick for the Dallas Cowboys, and you can see where he currently goes in drafts. We like Jake Ferguson. He goes as the tight end 15, 117th overall pick. So he's going as like a 10th, maybe even sometimes an 11th round pick in most fantasy drafts right now. And look, I get it. Based on what he did last year, it wasn't great. He burned a lot of people, but context matters so much when it comes to Jake Ferguson. Because Ferguson himself, due to injury, only played 14 games last year, but he played even less with Dak Prescott. If I pull up the RotoViz game splits tool right here, you can see he only played in 7 games with Dak last year. But in those 7 games, he was averaging over 10 fantasy points per game. He was a top 10 tight end, and he was actually averaging 7.5 targets per game compared to the games without Dak, and he was playing with Cooper Rush, just 5 fantasy points per game. His points cut in half. His receiving yards cut in half. His targets went from 7.5 to less than 5, right? So this is a guy, and obviously they were less efficient when Dak, we all know, is a better quarterback, I hope we all know, than Cooper Rush. So Ferguson, with Dak last year, was quality. He was a strong tight end. And that's despite the dude having over 80 targets and 0 touchdowns. If he sees over 80 targets again, my guess is he sees at least 1 touchdown, probably like 4 or 5. Because let's not forget, just the year before that, when Dak was fully healthy for the season in 2023, Jake Ferguson led all tight ends with 25 red zone targets. This was in a season when when CeeDee Lamb was the number 1 overall player in fantasy, having a bunch of touchdowns and targets as well, and Ferguson was still number 1 amongst all tight ends, and not only tight end receptions in the red zone with 13, but red zone targets as well. And now entering 2025, he's in one of the better spots maybe of his career. For starters, he's healthy, and he just signed this 4-year extension worth $52 million in new money with $30 million guaranteed. So they invested in him, which just shows how much that they value him, and they've seen the usage that him and Dak, the connection that they have together when they're both out there on the field. If you look at the target competition, it's definitely gotten more difficult. As you can see right here, George Pickens was added, but Pickens is not a guy who wins in the same areas of the field as Jake Ferguson, right? Jake Ferguson is not going to be the guy running 20 to 30 yards downfield on the outside. He's going to be the guy on the line in the slot, similar to David Njoku in the Browns offense in some ways, that's going to win in those short to intermediate parts of the field, going to win in the red zone, just totally different ways than where George Pickens wins. And oh yeah, the last time, like we said, Dak Prescott was healthy, the Cowboys led the NFL in passing touchdowns back in 2023. If we just look at that season overall, Dak threw for 4,500 yards. He played all 17 games. He had a whopping 590 pass attempts. They were number 3 overall in yards per game, first in red zone attempts, top 5 in volume with these 590 attempts, right? So if Dak is going to be back and healthy, yeah, this offense is built to throw the ball. They're not built to run the ball when their main running backs right now are a late rookie in Jaden Blue, Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, these veterans who really never panned out. They're built to pass the ball, which is why Jake Ferguson, as a 10th or 11th round pick as the tight end 15 right now, looks like a steal late in drafts, especially when you compare him to a guy who goes right above him most of the time in Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid goes often as the tight end 14 in drafts, and I just think that this is a mistake. Dalton Kincaid, a former first round pick, fine. Look, this has been a guy who's been given so much volume the last 2 years from the Bills. Maybe he's been a little bit banged up during that stretch. There's some reports about that, but he just hasn't panned out yet. And it's not like I'm completely out on Dalton Kincaid. The Bills, like during training camp, all their guys are getting banged up. Khalil Shakur dealing with the injury. You have Josh Palmer dealing with an injury, right? You have Dawson Knox, the other tight end in this room, dealing with an injury. So Kincaid, maybe he can get going this year. Maybe he can score more than 2 receiving touchdowns, finish as better than the tight end 18 or the tight end 14 that he's done in his first 2 seasons. We just haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen this offense prioritize him, not in the red zone. They take him off the field when Dawson Knox has been healthy, splitting snaps at times. And now the target competition might be a little bit more difficult for him. They bring in Elijah Moore, a guy who wins in the same areas of the field as Dalton Kincaid. When Khalil Shakur is healthy, he wins in the same areas of the field as Dalton Kincaid. They bring in Josh Palmer, who, assuming his camp injuries are nothing major, he's going to be another guy who's been shining in camp right now. We know they want to get Keon Coleman entering his second year more involved in the offense. So like, yes, if Dalton Kincaid can pop up for an 8 to 10 touchdown season, he's going to be a valuable piece in fantasy, of course. But we can say that for any tight end, including Jake Ferguson. Right now, I just think you're going to get more volume and a higher volume passing offense from a guy like Jake Ferguson right here, who goes later in drafts slightly behind Dalton Kincaid. We want Dalton Kincaid instead. But if you want to actually see where I have some of these tight end ranked in my top 50 overall rankings completely free, you can check it out, link down below, or you can head to fantasyrankingsfree.com. That is fantasyrankingsfree.com. That will take you to this page where you just enter your email, and then I instantly send you the top 50 overall rankings. Just make sure to check your spam and promotional folders, especially the promotional folders. A lot of people have seen that it's gone to there. And basically what you get, the top 50 players ranked, they're tiered. It highlights in green and red the best and worst picks in every single round. But if you are a serious fantasy player with a draft coming up that you want to win and you want my full top 250 rankings for your entire draft, all my other drafting tools and my in-season tools from draft day to championship week, that's why I built the Fantasy Blueprint. It's what I use in all my leagues, and over 10,000 people right now are using in their leagues. If you want to learn more about the Blueprint, you can click the link in the description below to go to this page, or you can head to jointheblueprint.com. That is jointheblueprint.com to learn more about everything you get right here. You can check it all out. You can see all the reviews from people who used the product last year and are back this year. And I've said it before, but over 85% of people, so like 9 out of 10 people who signed up last year, are back this year, which just goes to show you if they liked it last year, it's probably a good product, help them win, smack around their friends to come back this year. So if you want to get the Blueprint for your drafts and every week during the season, head to jointheblueprint.com. There are limited spots available this year. We just actually had to open up a couple more spots because so many people reached out. So if you want in, now's the time. Now, the next tight end you want to be taking is Evan Engram, who might be one of the biggest values in all of fantasy drafts at the tight end position right now, because Evan Engram, if we look at his current ADP, goes as the 85th overall pick right now. So you're getting this guy in like round 8 of your fantasy drafts, which is pretty solid based on his upside. The tight end 8 overall. I like this a lot because look, I get it. There was a down year last year for Evan Engram in 2024. I had him in some serious leagues. If you watch the Flock League channel with Mason Dodd, Flock Fantasy, and a bunch of other creators, you know that Evan Engram drove me crazy. And he drove me crazy because of this. He had the hamstring injury right at the start of the year during warmups, which kept him out for like a month of the season, and it lingered. He had the shoulder injury later in the season in week 14, which ended his season. So basically, this dude was like only really healthy, like over the hamstring, for maybe 4 to 6 weeks at most, which that context matters for when he had a down year. Because you can't just look at it and go, oh, he went from being a top 8 tight end in back-to-back seasons. He was a top 5 tight end the year before with the Jaguars, to then just finishing as the tight end 12, only scoring 1 touchdown, not even getting you to 10 fantasy points per game. Dang, that really stinks. Of course that really stinks when you look at the fact that he just was not out there on the field healthy and he was leaving games early, but he still averages over 7 targets per game despite leaving a couple of these games early. That was more than George Kittle. He posted a 25% target share. That was number 3 amongst tight ends. Very quietly, he got a target on 33% of his routes, which is an elite number for any position, especially tight ends, number 2 overall at that position. This was a guy who was very good. He had a higher target share than Kelsey, then Kittle, then Kincaid, all these guys who go above him or right next to him in fantasy drafts. And oh yeah, he only played in 4 games last year where he was not on the injury report and Trevor Lawrence was healthy before Lawrence got hurt. And in those 4 games, he was basically the Evan Engram we saw in previous years. 13.5 fantasy points per game, 55 receiving yards per game, 7.5 targets per game. He basically had double the fantasy points per game when he was healthy with Trevor Lawrence, which should have been the expectation last year. So when everything actually clicked as we thought it would, he was good. And now he ends up landing over on the Denver Broncos, which honestly is a perfect situation for him because in terms of target competition, it's really just Courtland Sutton, who the Broncos just extended. Like, this is like the only threatening competition. Marvin Mims, I'm not worried about. Like, this is a guy who they were using out of the backfield at times last year. Devon Vele, okay, he was good based on expectations last year. Not worried about him. Pat Bryant is standing out in camp. We'll see how much this bigger receiver will actually work. Will he play out of the slot or not? Like, I'm not too worried about this. In terms of the guys who will dominate those middle of the field targets that actually the Broncos need help with, they needed that in their offense last year. It's going to be Sutton on the outside, insert your other outside receiver, and Evan Engram working the middle of the field. We can see here some of the reports from camp. Evan Engram will have a pivotal role in the passing game and looks as advertised. That was coming out of OTAs, mandatory mini camps heading into training camp. We've gotten only more reports about Evan Engram in training camp. He seems to really be gelling well with the team. We know Sean Payton at times has called him his Joker, or at least he hasn't called him his Joker. Evan Engram has anointed himself the Joker, meaning he'll be used all over the formation, which we do like. These are the numbers last year for Evan Engram. And now part of this is skewed because Mac Jones took over. 5.7 yards per target is not great. That was 37th. He's not getting too many downfield targets, but that's fine. I mean, this is a guy who's going to work in the short to middle parts of the field with the Broncos and work after the catch. So although we didn't see it last year, and again, it was skewed because he was hurt. It was skewed because he was playing with Mac Jones. Honestly, that role will work well for Bo Nix if he's just going to throw short to Evan Engram. That's what Bo Nix did in college for so much success and at times last year in the middle of the field. Bo Nix as a rookie, the former first-round pick last year, let's just remind you as well, was a quality player. I mean, this is a guy you could have relied on in fantasy. He was top 6 as a starter in completions, passing touchdowns. He threw 500. Let's look at it right here, right? Why talk about it? When he threw for nearly 4,000 yards, started every game. He threw 567 times last year. This is great. This is a gold mine. I think they're only going to throw even more this year. They invested in the backfield, J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, but I think this team is still going to throw the ball. Now let's compare this situation to Mark Andrews, who I personally believe you should be taking right now, one Evan Ingram over Mark Andrews, but that's not how it goes in fantasy drafts. He's currently being drafted ahead of Evan Ingram. That's Mark Andrews, even though last year his numbers were not all that impressive. A lot of you know this if you drafted him. He only averaged barely 4 targets per game. He ranked 18th in tight end target share. Everything in terms of like the usage just kind of hit career lows or close to career lows. You can see the Dynasty Grill talks about him saying to sell Andrews in fantasy. In Dynasty, he says yards per route run went from 27 to 17, or his routes last year per game. So he was running 27 routes. He was a full-on starter to just 17 per game last year. And the biggest thing was Mark Andrews came alive the second half of the season because of this tweet, or part of the same exact tweet you can see right here from the Dynasty Grill. Mark Andrews had 11 touchdowns on 55 receptions. The dude was having a touchdown every 5 catches, which is just not going to sustain, especially when he has some more target competition, specifically in the red zone this year. And that competition is DeAndre Hopkins, who apparently looks good in camp, right? This is a guy who should be a red zone body. And let's just kind of call it how it is. Lamar Jackson threw over 40 touchdown passes last year, 17 more than the year before that. If Lamar Jackson doesn't throw 40 touchdown passes this year, and it goes back to, probably somewhere around 30, that's obviously going to hurt Mark Andrews' upside, who specifically is relying on touchdowns right now. Now, it should be noted that Isaiah Likely is probably going to miss the start of the season, or maybe he gets back for week 1, but is not 100% healthy with a broken bone in his foot. So, of course, this should give Mark Andrews more routes to start the season. So maybe he gets off to a hot start. But overall, for the entire season, Evan Ingram is the guy who legitimately has like 90 reception upside in his offense, where Mark Andrews, I struggle to see him even seeing. I mean, he might not even get 90 targets. I think he's going to see 90 targets, but he might not even catch 60, 70 balls this year. So you want to be taking, in my opinion, Evan Ingram over Mark Andrews. Then you want to be taking this next late round tight end. And that man's name is Chig Okonkwo, the former 4th round pick for the Tennessee Titans, still on the Tennessee Titans. I think this is a sleeper tight end who could be a breakout candidate for you, and you basically don't even have to spend a draft pick on him. He goes as the tight end 25, 195th overall pick, means he's probably going to be a free agent in most fantasy drafts. If you have a deep draft, like an 18 to a 20-man league, maybe he's on the board in the last round, and I think he's worth a flyer. Look, when you look at his stats, there's a reason he goes this late. In his 3 seasons in the NFL, he's finished as the tight end 28, tight end 26, and tight end 31 in fantasy points. None of those things are good. They're not going to get you excited at all. The dude had literally just 6.7 fantasy points per game last year, which was a career high. That's not flashy, but let's actually look at some of the context. First off, down the stretch last year with bad quarterbacks and Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, Chig Okonkwo started to produce. You can see right here, over the final 6 games of the season, Okonkwo is averaging 11.2 fantasy points per game on 6.5 targets per game. That was nearly 3 times the amount of targets per game according to RotoViz game split tools, and nearly 3 times the amount of points per game. That 11 fantasy points per game, he was a top 10 tight end basically the second half of last season very quietly. And now his situation looks much better. If you look at it right here, first overall pick according to the Team Changes tracker in the Fantasy Blueprint. Again, check it out at jointheblueprint.com. Cam Ward, number 1 overall pick, comes in. They improved the offensive line, so Okonkwo might not have to block as much. Kevin Zeitler at guard, Dan Moore at tackle. They add some pieces in the draft as well. Okay, so this situation is looking better. But the one thing they didn't do was bring in any like standout pass catchers from a competition standpoint. Because this competition, what they brought in was Van Jefferson and Tyler Lockett. It's basically just Calvin Ridley. We've talked about Calvin Ridley. We like Calvin Ridley on this channel. Has 150 target upside. After that, though, like Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson, rookies in Alec Imanor, Chamir Deek. I'm not worried about any of these guys. I think there's a real possibility that Chig Okonkwo, in what should be an improving offense with a new quarterback and upgraded offensive line, could be the number 2 option in this offense. And again, we're not looking for Chig Okonkwo or thinking that Chig Okonkwo is going to finish as the tight end 1 overall. We're saying that with the last pick in our draft, we can go out there and maybe get a viable tight end to score 10 to 15 points a week. I mean, the dude has breakout upside compared to a guy in Jonnu Smith who was a breakout tight end last year, but then gets traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where I don't think there's much upside. But despite this, Jonnu goes as a top 12 tight end. He goes as a 9th round pick in fantasy drafts right now. He's literally going 110th overall compared to Chig Okonkwo, who goes 195th overall. He's going like 7 rounds before Chig Okonkwo in fantasy drafts, and I just don't see the upside for Jonnu Smith. I mean, the guy landed on a team where the Pittsburgh Steelers, he might not even be the starting tight end on his team. Former 2nd round pick Pat Freiermuth is highly talented. He dominates the middle of the fields. There's also Darnell Washington, who's always on the field a lot, especially for his blocking. Like, this is just a gross situation for Jonnu Smith, who might be splitting snaps now. And let's not get it twisted. Like Pat Freiermuth, maybe he had high expectations coming out of the draft. I believe the same draft class as Kyle Pitts, so both those guys had high expectations. But this is still a talented tight end. I mean, if you look at Pat Freiermuth's stats overall, let's just look at it recently, right? This is a guy who last year had 65 receptions on 78 targets, played in every single game last year, 7 touchdowns as well. He's a red zone target. Like, yeah, I'd be concerned if I was a Jonnu Smith dynasty owner or somebody who drafted him earlier this summer in like best ball drafts, especially when the gap is so wide. Like, I'm not taking Jonnu Smith over these rookies, Tyler Warren, Colson Loveland, not even the range we talked about earlier with Dalton Kincaid and Jake Ferguson. And heck, I'd even be taking and going out on a limb for the value all the way down here and taking Chigakonku in terms of value over a Jonnu Smith this year. All right, now before we get into the next tight end that you need to be drafting, I have to point out that drafting an elite tight end in like those earlier rounds of your drafts is actually more viable on PPR platforms like DraftKings Best Ball. For example, right now in DraftKings Best Ball PPR format, you can get Trey McBride in round 3 as the 27th overall player. He goes after guys, if we scroll up, like Jonathan Taylor, way after guys like Josh Jacobs, who don't really have a lot of reception upside. And the reason why a guy like Trey McBride is so important is not only on DraftKings Best Ball does he get the 100-yard bonus for bonus points, he's getting a full point per reception. And if you know anything about Trey McBride, this is an elite pass catching tight end. We literally just saw it last year when he ranked amongst the top 10 players in the NFL with 111 receptions, right? These 111 receptions, even if it's only like 90 to 100 this year, that separates him massively, even more on a PPR format like DraftKings Best Ball than the other tight ends. Like, it's much more than a standard or a half PPR format. Now, I've teamed up with DraftKings Best Ball, and lately I've been drafting elite tight ends like a McBride or a George Kittle, even recently like last week in those round 3 to 4 of drafts. Now, if you're not familiar, DraftKings Best Ball is a fantasy game type where you draft your team once, no waivers, no trades, and no setting your lineups. And that's honestly what makes DraftKings Best Ball so fun. It's the best part of fantasy, drafting your team. You draft your team once and then you just watch it ride all year. Now, I thought I would just bring that up because I do think those PPR formats, especially DraftKings Best Ball, we're partnered with them. Be sure to check it out. Are a lot of fun, especially to take tight ends early. And another tight end you don't have to take early, you can take him later, is actually Theo Johnson right now. This guy basically never gets drafted, the Giants' second-year tight end. Let's pull it up because look at where Theo Johnson goes. He goes as the tight end 36, the 284th overall player. Of course, this means he's never getting drafted, but if he was going to get drafted, he's going as like a 23rd round fantasy pick. Because if you want athleticism, oh boy, Theo Johnson brings it. Not only is this a 6'6" behemoth of a man, 259 pounds. Look at this. At the NFL Combine as a rookie last year, he ran a 4.57 40. According to Player Profiler, top 2% speed, top 5% burst, top 2% catch radius. He was one of the most freaky players we've ever seen at the Combine. Look at the RAS score, right? Relative athletic score. He got a 9.9. A 9.9 out of 10 is what Theo Johnson got. One of the best athletes of all time at the Combine. He ranked second out of over 1,100 tight ends dating back to 1987 in the RAS database. That's how freaky this guy is, and we actually saw flashes of it last year before he got injured for the Giants in his rookie season. Like, if you look at the overall stats, just 43 targets, just an 11% target share, 3.6 targets per game. None of that's going to make you jump up and down, right? The overall production, 29 catches, 331 yards. It's just like 2 catches a game for 27 yards. Yeah, that's not great, but let's actually look at some of the splits. Once he got the tight end position under his belt, he started to get it going. And let me remind you, a bad offense, bad offensive line, and bad quarterbacks last year for the Giants. And despite that, we got some flashes out of Theo Johnson. In his final 4 games before injury, he was averaging about 10 fantasy points per game on nearly 6 targets per game and 45 yards per game. Again, this is with bad quarterbacks, a bad offensive line, and he started to break away. He had these big explosive plays of 20 plus yards over the middle of the field for multiple weeks, and then he ended up getting hurt. But now he gets a quarterback upgrade, right? He gets all these guys. Jackson Dart, first round pick, Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, likely the starter to start the year. These are all guys who are upgrades over what they had last season. And honestly, like Brian Daboll, this is a guy who uses tight ends in his past dating back to Buffalo. He's tried to get guys incorporated as much as he can, even thinking back to like Daniel Bellinger's rookie year, rushing him in the red zone before Daniel Bellinger's eye injury. Speaking of Daniel Bellinger, he's still on this team, but he's no competition. Like, Theo Johnson is the starting tight end for this team. We saw that pretty clearly last year that none of these other guys were all that involved in the offense. I mean, Theo Johnson was playing 84% of the snaps, quietly ranked top 10 overall. Guys like Daniel Bellinger and Chris Manhertz only combined for 17 catches last year. Theo Johnson is clearly the guy. And I say the guy at the tight end position because we know that there's Malik Neighbors on this team. Like, Malik Neighbors is going to soak up. Like, he had 170 targets last year. I wouldn't doubt if it happens again. But outside of that, they bring back Darius Slayton. They still have Wan'Dale Robinson. They still have Jalen Hyatt. This is the exact same target competition for Theo Johnson when he started to earn 6 targets per game last year. We're not expecting this team to be that great. They're probably still going to have to throw 30, 35, sometimes 40 times a game to keep up. So Theo Johnson, why can't he have these big breakout weeks? That's why I like him as a late round option. And oh yeah, by the way, last year the Giants ranked dead last in passing touchdowns. You can see it right here, 15th overall, 3 less than any other team in the league, which is crazy. Now imagine with these improved quarterbacks that they just go from being dead last to just average 20 touchdowns, maybe 24 or 25. And the big body Theo Johnson, the athletic freak, if they're going to throw 20 to 25 touchdowns this year, maybe he catches 5, maybe he catches 6 or 7. So when I see that Theo Johnson goes after these types of guys, Harold Farnan, a backup behind David Njoku, he's going after guys like Tyler Conklin, don't even know what his role is going to be this year. Terrence Ferguson, a rookie that I do like, but who knows what his role is going to be this year, right? Elijah Arroyo, another rookie this year. Dalton Schultz never really has panned out. He's going way beyond these guys. We saw flashes from Theo Johnson last year with limited target competition outside of Malik Neighbors. I'll take some stabs on him with that late round or last round pick if you want to get 2 tight ends, spend your last one on a dart throw. I'd prefer Chigakonkwo if he's gone. Yeah, sure, Theo Johnson. So these are the 5 tight ends that you should be taking instead of the guys that most people are taking instead, a lot of the time just because of name value, which is wrong. So this is going to help you with the tight end position, but if you want to have the most help for those first 2 to 3 rounds, the most important rounds of your draft, I ranked my top 24 overall players. It's a guide to help you with those first 2 to 3 rounds of your draft in this video right here. Be sure to check it out. I think it's going to help you out a ton.